Hey guys, Jake here. So I'd taken some time, did a little mini meditation. I'm like, okay, what's kind of really coming home? And this first subject is a cool one. So the three things I'm going to go through are, first of all, Nostr.build, which is it's a tool that I'm using as part of publishing content on Nostr. The second is around venture investing. And this week I had two guests, Lewis Liu and Mike Cook. Shout out to them. Both episodes will come out before this, that had slightly differing views on the potential for early stage equity investing, which I'll talk through. And then finally, I've gotten written down here the triple threat. And so I've seen today an email from Anthony Pompliano. He is talking about the ability to operate companies and deploy capital and create content as the triple threat. And that's something that one should be aiming to do. Yeah, let me break all those things down. So number one, so Nostr.build. So I posted this week something, and it got the attention in particular of my producers, Mike and Pat. Shout out to those guys. An integral part of what I'm building with this podcast is having a top class team. And they were really intrigued by what I talked through, which was essentially, what does it mean when you are the product? Now let's frame this in a more traditional sense initially, which is, it's so easy to talk to my friends using Facebook. And I wind the clock back to like 2000 and let's call it 8, something like that. And I'd left school 2 years before. I was traveling the world, and I was just signing up to Facebook as it had kind of hammered through all the universities, communities in the States. And, we could post photographs more easily than before. And it was just this really fun tool. And suddenly you had a little Facebook profile. You're like, oh, this is great. And really, we're just talking in tiny kind of micro communities. And it's so different what it looks like today. But it was free, right? Or isn't it? And you can just sign up with an email and a password, and off you go. It's transpired over many years now that, like, this is just a classic example where you accepting something as being free, actually you're the product, and it's not immediately obvious why. And so in this case, like, why are you the product? So if you sign up for, Facebook today, or Instagram, or YouTube, or TikTok, or X, the point of these tools is to gather information, to have entertainment, to learn, to interact with your friends, and it's quote unquote free to have an account. But what they've really become is what I've heard described as a phrase which I quite like, actually: surveillance capitalism. And another way of looking at it is basically like selling your attention. And so, as you'll notice, the Facebook ads or the Instagram ads feed takes a pretty common process. If anyone's ever watched Jab, 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 Punch, which I think is a Gary Vee book, and forgive me if that's the wrong title, but it's something along those lines. And essentially, you want to be offering someone value, and then trying to sell something. And actually, this is a pretty common advertising technique. And so really what these social media companies are is advertising platforms. And so the user is going to be able to sold products to. So the customer is actually the company that pays for the advertising. They pay for attention. And the cool thing that Facebook's been able to do, which is like unfathomable before, right, with a standard TV advert on a broadcast channel or in a newspaper, you didn't know who was looking at the advert. But because of the innovation that is, the internet, we can actually see the age, the sex, the preferences, the location, and actually a very, very detailed picture on who each user is. And so Facebook's able to say, would you like to target adverts to? And you name it, right? Who is the avatar for your product? Who do you want to see your advert? And who do you want to try and catch their attention? And you've got this whole digital marketing beast where it's like, okay, well, this is the ideal person we're going after. This is the hook we're going to try and grab their attention with. And this is then the offer that we're going to try and sell. And to do this, we're going to spend $1 million on advertising. We're going to create $3 million worth of revenue. So our ad to revenue spend is 3 to 1. Boom. You then look at net profits, and you hope that revenue cost, that cost within revenue split, means that you make money. And it's been extraordinarily successful, right? You see these huge social media accounts that are punting products all day long. And in some ways, it's the social media business that's the meeting place for this, right? The software product provider. And that's why they get described as digital monopolies. or walled gardens, like, oh shit, got kicked off YouTube, banned because of community guidelines. Well, now you can't sell anything to anyone because YouTube won't let you on their platform. Okay, well, that's a problem, right? What if you didn't know what you said wrong? Like, who's to say what is right and wrong? One thing that comes to mind is this extraordinary experience where there was a company called Cambridge Analytica, which had military ties and was a data analysis business that was able to sell its product to political people. The original Trump campaign in 2016 had used Cambridge Analytica in some way. The Brexit vote had used it in some kind of way. And forgive me for glossing over the real story here. You should go and dig it up because it's fascinating. You could use these social media platforms to advance your agenda, whatever that agenda might be. And guess what? They were getting paid. So the social media platform doesn't care. And that's where this whole thing gets a bit messy, right? It's like, who is the customer? Who is paying for this stuff? Well, it doesn't really matter if you have no users, right? So if you have no eyeballs to sell stuff to, then it doesn't, what's your business model? And that's why they make them super gamified. That's why they try and trigger the shit out of you with angry things or sad things. And they're just trying to keep you on their platform as much as possible. And the more they keep you on there, the more adverts. Why am I even interested in Nostr? And it's because I'm interested in freedom of speech. Well, and many other things, but like we should be, and this is quite a libertarian philosophy, I guess, we should be able to say what we want, when we want, where we want. And you should be able to feel the feedback for that. Now, if you go up to a bar and you drink a few pints and you tell a bloke next to you, mate, you're a wanker, and you get hit in the face, well, that's real world feedback for saying something that someone didn't like. But when you're in the digital sphere, it's different. You can bitch and moan at someone all day long from a keyboard. It's the classic kind of keyboard warrior type thing. What does this actually mean and where does it take us? Well, Nostr is different. You have the cryptographic key pair, and this account is essentially a purveyor of truth, and they spit information out to all these different relays. And in order to shut down a specific account, you've got to get every single relay to stop posting that piece of information. And in the same way that it's like a game of whack-a-mole, sure, you can go out there and try and find every single Bitcoin node, of which there's thousands and thousands and thousands decentralized across the world, with every single Bitcoin transaction ever on it. In this case, every node, every relay is not actually carrying every single piece of information ever posted on Nostr, but they're very difficult to find. And there's just so many of them that to police this thing is going to be next to impossible. Now, certain clients will be in certain jurisdictions and will come under certain pressure, but you could just choose a different client. So you move from Damus to Primal, or Primal to Amethyst, or Amethyst to Iris. It doesn't matter. And essentially, Nostr flips the switch where the user is no longer the product. You're the user, and you can pay for services that improve your experience, and you can start to actually become your own algorithm. So there is no algorithm. There's nothing trying to wind you up or piss you off. And there's no way to get kicked off. I've heard people in the past talk about how they would, in some ways, find it quite amusing to see, like, where does Twitter draw the line? And they've got, reincarnation 7 of some anonymous profile that they're just shitposting all day long about whatever they want. And eventually they get kicked off. And they're like, oh, there was the line. And it's kind of a game. Whereas like on Nostr, the feel and touch of this thing is so different because you can't be censored. Simple as that. Or at least to my understanding, it's very, very difficult. Someone please correct me and reach out if that's not the case. And what does that mean? You're more accountable to your word. So now when I post something, it's like I actually have to really, truly mean this, because if it goes wrong, in some ways, maybe that physical reverb that is a punch in the face in a bar can actually come back to you. It's like, no, you did say this 5 years ago. It's clearly written here. Now, I do not agree with people who are penalized for a viewpoint they used to have. That's definitely not right. It's like, how do you feel today? And it's okay to be wrong in the past. But it's just a sense of a higher form of accountability. And to bring this full circle, so Nostr.build, shout out to the guys who have created that so far. I'm a happy user. I've spent about 400 Aussie dollars on a year-long membership for 100 gigabytes of data of storage space. And so I'm posting clips of my podcast on Nostr. And in order to do that, you need to use a data storage product. And when you post it on Instagram or on X or on TikTok, they do that for you. They make life as easy as possible to be a user of their platform, but in exchange for what? At what cost? Well, as a content creator, the cost is you're building on someone else's real estate that they can just rug pull you at any time. But actually, for the average user, there is a number of disbenefits that come to mind. So it's like you might not have many followers, you might not be creating some kind of content business, but you might like using these platforms to get information. So, okay, well, how does the platform play God? How do they decide what's appropriate or inappropriate? Well, just look at the incentive. For example, who are their customers and what are their customers paying them to do? Now, it transpired, the Twitter files blew this wide open. The customers of some of these platforms is actually governments. So hang on a second. So what's the right thing to say, not the right thing to say? And it was brilliantly highlighted during COVID, right? Oh, that's fake news. Says who? Like, it's now been officially confirmed by the powers that be in the White House that there was a lab leak in Wuhan, right? And it didn't come from some kind of wet market somewhere, or whatever the case might have been back in the day that was being spun as the story. But for a long time, people believed that. And that's because their source of information was actually corrupt, completely corrupted to the paying customer. And Nostr's different. Now, beware, like Nostr also puts the user back in charge of their data in a very cool way. Like you have more sense of privacy to release to the world. You can reveal to the world more what you want and what you don't want. And that's really cool. But it's also, the responsibility is on you to curate what you do and don't see. And this is where the idea of a web of trust comes in, which I've heard people talking about, the social graph, and how you can now move from Instagram to TikTok to X to Substack equivalents on Nostr with one key pair, and how exciting that is, because all the value that you create in these different walled gardens is now in one place. And it's like a network effect upon a network effect. So for those of us that have been close to the kind of tech world for a number of years now, the standout innovations in some ways has been using digital technology to create network effects and therefore ride, whether it's your equity investment or as a user getting huge traction on these platforms. It's been a wild ride. And Nostr is going to change that in ways that we still don't quite fully understand. But yeah, it's a strange process. So I'm like, okay, so I've got my public-private key pair. Now I've got Albi. Really impressed with their product, by the way. I've seen a few VC funds that have early stage equity in Albi, and that's just the kind of business that I'd be interested in investing in the future. I perhaps missed the boat slightly there, but you've got your Albi hub, and I've got the wallet Albi Go, and I've pulled it all together. And so now I've got my in my Chrome browser, I've got my Albi extension, which is basically like a password manager. So you trust only one entity with your npub and nsec, and that entity then plugs into other apps in the Nostr ecosystem. And it's just wild, that moment where suddenly your same profile and bio pops up in these different clients. You're like, oh my gosh, this is so powerful. And I'm so excited about it. And so where am I going with all this? The point is like, you got your little Albi plugin, and now you're like, okay, I'm going to go onto Primal, and I've got all these different clips that I've chopped out, and Pat and Michael have helped me edit, and I want to post them. It's like, well, hang on, I haven't figured this stuff out yet, by the way. Like, when's the best time of day to post? Is there the right time of day? Should you repost everything? Should you repost everything 3 or 4 times? There is no algorithm, right? It's a whole new world. I'm gonna close this section of the solo pod up with a shout out to Tiggs who brought this up recently, and it's something really cool. So when I zap on Nostr, I'm sending 1,000 sats each time, which is give or take $1. And I tend to like things when it's just like made me giggle, but like when I see something, I'm like, oh, that helped me learn something. I'm like, boom, send some sats. And you can have a phrase that goes with the sats, like a comment. It's often like coffee on me or let's go. And I've just put the Jake Woodhouse podcast. And so each time I zap, especially if my 1,000 sats is the largest zap to a post, suddenly the Jake Woodhouse podcast is written at the bottom of all of these posts. And it's like an advertising billboard. And you think, oh, wow, that's interesting. How might that work? And I don't know if that's like helped anyone find my profile. I haven't got any data yet to back this up as like how it actually functions as a marketing exercise. But imagine a world in which you build a publishing machine that becomes like a digital fortress for pumping out information that is decentralized, uncensorable, in sync with its audience in a value for value manner, which is actually like a matched incentive alignment. It's like we're paying you for the information you're creating. And that to me is very, very exciting. And we're going to see different products pop out of that in ways that we didn't expect. We'll see lots of growth. It's the macro scenario is interesting. Like, Elon Musk is corruptible, right? X is corruptible. It's absolutely a matter of time. And it's a question of when, not if, they start some kind of renewed pressure to rein in freedom of speech. And that funny phrase of like freedom of speech is one thing, but it doesn't mean you get freedom of reach. And so these guys on the back end, like Zuckerberg is a big example of this, huge controlling stake in his business still. He is Rome, as someone I heard describe him recently. Like the amount of users that guy has on active businesses of his every day is insane. And so his agenda is whatever, right or wrong, he's able to infiltrate it in some way. And so is that right? Is that wrong? Well, in some senses, you're playing on their turf. It's a private business. You're on their land. It's like being a leaseholder in a office block and you're a business there. If you piss off the landlord, they're just going to kick you out. Same thing. Whereas with Nostr, it's different. You're actually building a piece of digital real estate that is yours. And it's very cheap to maintain. As long as you look after the NSEC and no one steals it from you, it's yours forever, providing the public service that's required to keep the Nostr network growing and getting stronger. And I still haven't fully figured that bit out. I'd love to learn more about like how relays actually work and the business models behind them to make sure this is actually sustainable. But yeah, what an interesting insight to suddenly be in a situation where like, okay, we want to post this content on Nostr. How do we actually do it? Well, to do it, we have to use something like Nostr.build. There was another product that came up recently called Satellite.earth, where basically it's like uploading something to your Google Drive or to your Dropbox, and then you click a button and it pushes it out onto the Nostr network. And it just sits in that data storage. And actually you can start to see statistics and how many people have viewed it, what unique views turned up and what didn't. And what's wild is that it's still so early. There's not even like an aggregation platform or feature that Nostr.build have created where I can't see how many views I generate with my content from month to month or week to week in aggregate. And so I get very excited as a content creator who's played around in this space for a number of years about like, well, what's going to be created next? And businesses that come to mind in the past is obviously the actual social media platforms themselves. What's the next Instagram? Well, maybe it's Nostr, and it's Nostr with a combination of these tools that's just better. And as soon as these guys realize, in my opinion, like what's the biggest fear of a lot of these content creators? Well, it's been switched off. And they've got all this sunk cost into their current audience, yes, but at some point that will flip. And it's kind of like fund managers in Bitcoin. For a long time, the career risk as being, oh, you can't put Bitcoin in a portfolio because the career risk is too high. Whereas now it's like, why haven't you got Bitcoin in there? And the same thing, in my opinion, is going to happen with Nostr in the future. Number two, now just to talk about some venture investing stuff. I guess let me give some context here. I made investments into 9 early stage companies in 2017, 2018, 2019. And they were businesses that I found via an angel syndicate, so the Green Angel Syndicate in London. At the time, I was very interested in sustainability. And I wanted to put my money behind businesses that I thought were a part of the clean tech future. And it's another story altogether as to why I shifted so radically towards Bitcoin and why I think Bitcoin is probably the most important innovation when it comes to long-term resource management. That's a story for another day. Maybe if anyone's interested, reach out and I'll do a pod about it. But point is I spent a long time looking for early stage companies to buy equity in them. And it's a very, very risky, very difficult place to make any money. First of all, like how long does it take for an entrepreneur to build a business from start to finish? Well, 10 years, 15 years. What's the liquidity point of like an IPO, which is very let's just give you a vanilla scenario. So entrepreneur with a technology background and a close couple of mates comes out of university with some groundbreaking technology, some kind of AI based software. And they say, okay, we want to build a product around this that's going to help automate the back end of like this massive market that no one's thought about yet. And they go, okay, we want a pre-seed of 500 grand at a valuation of 2 million. Like, cool. So they sell 25% of their business. And then they do a seed round. And then they do a series A, series B, series C. And eventually they've built such a big business that they're like, actually, we'd love to go public and we want to do an IPO. And they might even do like a SPAC, which is what JWP built recently. So some kind of pre-IPO deal. And that road for a company requires different skills at different times, different people at different times, different capital at different times. And so this is super early stage, high risk, patient capital. And they often talk about something called smart money. So really, there's money floating around for good entrepreneurs, but they don't want to take it from anyone. They want to take it from someone that's A, built and sold a company before, so they have the expertise to help them grow this thing, and B, a network. So they want the money, they want the expertise, and they want the connections. So why would you take money from someone that's an expert in the mining market when actually you're building a software product for developers? It doesn't make sense, right? It's a fascinating place because people have amazing ideas, but ideas and execution are two completely different things. And there's not very many people out there that are good at actually executing on an idea. So ideas are very, very cheap. People that are willing to spend an inordinate amount of time and throw themselves all in on building an idea, they're very hard to find. And I think some of the real takeaway I got from working through the syndicate was the amount of due diligence that's done on early stage ideas in order to receive investment. Like before I joined the syndicate, I was a complete idiot in terms of how I was looking for companies and how I was trying to analyze them. I was able to sit next to some ex-entrepreneurs and ex-VC fund managers who were like 60, 70 years old that were now just having a bit of fun as some angels and study how they looked at these people. And they're looking at the team, they're looking at the market, they're looking at the product, they're looking at the traction, they're looking at the financials, all this stuff. But ultimately, most of them fail. It's as simple as that. They just don't last the course. Maybe there's a regulatory shift. Maybe the market went back to how it was before. Maybe there just wasn't enough demand. Maybe the CEO got divorced and got fed up and couldn't handle doing it. Maybe someone fell sick. It's you name it, right? So many things can go wrong. Anyway, this week, first, Lewis Liu, shout out to Lewis. We were talking about Bitcoin. We were talking about Bitcoin in relation to venture, and his view was quite clear, I think, which is that he doesn't see a lot of value in allocating to early stage equity right now. And the reason for that is because he thinks that Bitcoin itself is the best product. How do you grow an equity position faster than Bitcoin? Especially on top of that, with the illiquidity and the risk involved with building a company. And so I would summarize my conversation with him was like, venture's cool, but it's really not worth much of your time. And it was interesting because then I spoke with Mike Cook, and shout out to Mike, who I think had a slightly different view. And these are people with totally different backgrounds, different experience. Lewis is probably just about 30. He may not even be 30 yet, whereas Mike will be in his mid 50s. And Mike was more interested in it in that, if you can find a company that has got a early stage product that has hit product market fit, needs some cash to grow, and is able to grow fast over a fairly short period of time, then in his view, why not? Of course you could beat the Bitcoin hurdle rate. And venture's the way to do that. Like, these ideas need money. And a good entrepreneur will want the right financing to make it happen. And it's a sense of utopia to think that Bitcoin can just crack on without additional help. I've been using this analogy of like having a Ferrari parked in the driveway, but what if there's no roads? Like that? you can't go anywhere in your car. And that's not to say, you could be somewhere like Singapore and have a supercar, but not go any more than 30 kilometers an hour, which I always thought was so insane. But it's not about the car in terms of the speed, is it? It's about how you look for those kind of people. Where am I going with this? I think the point is I'm feeling around like, okay, so Bitcoin really caught my attention, and it still absolutely does. What can I do next that's actually going to move the needle in a sense and be something I can really throw my weight behind? And I think it's because I'm looking I'm looking for the right lens. And it can be as simple as just learning a slightly different way of looking at things. It helps you go, oh, that makes more sense now. Okay, I can really get behind that. So yeah, I guess in summary, I'm still researching, I'm still thinking and going, okay, how can I kind of get back into that early stage equity investing space that I enjoyed so much and not feel like I'm just pissing away Bitcoin? Because it's like everything's an opportunity cost against keeping Bitcoin. I think one last idea I'm going to throw out there, and this is something that I'm just thinking through, but for anyone that's followed this content lately, I've been working quite hard in kind of personal development. And so shout out to Jason Parks in particular, who's been mentoring me recently. You can dig up Jason's episode if you're interested in this. We're talking a lot about energetics, frequency, clearing trauma, having a crystal clear vision as to like the person that you actually are, having ethics in place that you abide by at all times. And it's fascinating stuff. And I'll also give a shout out to Jin Ong, Dr. Jin. Jin did a great episode too, and she's talking about manifestation and working on your emotional health and how important it is to clear away a lot of this stuff before opportunities can even actually appear. And what's so fun about this is because it's like you're really playing around with our spirituality, with our mindset, the operating system that we make everyday decisions with. And it gets me so fascinated. It's like, okay, well, what if you could create some kind of accelerator program where you enable people to do this kind of work? And of course, Bitcoin would be involved, but it involves like the hard yards. Like you've got to go out and you've got to go and have therapy sessions with these kind of characters. Therapy is the wrong word. You need to want to learn how they have empowered themselves with this kind of higher or more sophisticated form of manifestation of thought, of thought process. That's the right phrase. And it's like, what does it look like if you can have a cohort of these kind of characters? So motivated in and around Bitcoin, building on a sound money standard. Whether or not it goes anywhere, we'll see. But I feel strongly that like by building some kind of program like that, for example, the sovereign engineering cohort over in Madeira, I'd love to learn more about that. I've got Max Hildebrand coming on the show soon, and I'm pretty sure that he's been through that. So I'll certainly ask him about it. Awesome team that have set that up. It's like, what does that actually look like? And how does it feel? And I've heard nothing but positive things. That is an edge. It's like you've been through this system where as investors, well, the capital's sitting at the other end. If you get through it in the right way, you're then getting some seed funding to help you build, your life's work. And I feel very strongly that like building your life's work needs to be yours. So on that journey, you do not want to be selling so much of your business that you've lost control. And you don't want to be fighting against a venture capital fund, for example, that's desperate to get you to IPO or desperate to get you to raise another round of funding just so that they can, arbitrarily uptick their valuations on their funds. So it would require the right kind of investor as well. Someone who sees a long-term picture, someone who's interested in kind of giving back to the ecosystem. And that to me is really powerful. So yeah, it needs some work and I'll continue to do that. Okay, lastly, so the triple threat. Shout out to Pomp. We haven't yet met. We will one day, I'm sure. I have followed him for many years. I definitely don't agree with all of the things that he does and all the content he puts out there, but that's okay. We're adults. We don't have to agree with each other the whole time. But I do enjoy his letter that he posts on Substack, and I'm a paying subscriber to that. It's really cool watching him evolve, which I think is kind of one of the powers of content and it's potentially someone might be watching and saying the same about me perhaps, but the process of learning in public is very powerful. And it's in a sense in some symbiosis with this idea of privacy. Like you should be able to choose to reveal to the world what you want and at different times. And when that's taken away from you, then that's not right, in my view. And so in this case, it's like, from a professional perspective, from perhaps a career building perspective, by creating content, you're out there sharing your view of the world and openly trying to learn, trying to iterate. And in my case, I don't mind being wrong. Like, tell me I'm wrong and explain how. And I'd like to learn about that. And So the triple threat is this idea, at least it's very, very brief, but it was such a short email. He's launching a new show. He's doing it specifically on X. I've just ranted for 20 minutes about how amazing I think Nostr is. And I'm like, so interesting how these kind of almost call Pomp now like a legacy content creator. He's been doing it so long, such a big audience, is choosing to put his time and energy into one platform, and it's X. And what are the platform risks if you do that? And what are the incentives of doing that when you already have a massive audience versus not? And what's the right call 10 years from now? But time will tell. But I'm very dubious about putting myself all in on one platform. I think that's completely mad because anyway, yeah, whatever. I won't dwell on that. But so the triple threat is the idea of, first of all, operating businesses. So, getting as much exposure to running a business as possible, whether you are the actual full-on founder or whether you joined a business that's cash flowing, selling services, selling products, and just getting as much hands-on experience for like how that actually works. And, in Pomp's case, he's also running a fund, right? So allocating capital is the next part of the triple threat. It's like, okay, so first you want to be absolutely running your own businesses or running someone else's business and getting as much exposure to that as possible. That becomes your cash flow. That also becomes a way of growing equity positions. But on top of that, it's like actually investing capital in businesses. It's like, okay, well, why does he want to do that? Well, obviously, you can make money by investing in other businesses. And the more that you do it, the better you get at it. Your networks improve. You have investors that start to like you. You have founders that start to like you. And you can build up a relationship portfolio, essentially, which you can start to leverage. And both of those two skill sets and time allocations, i.e. operating businesses and investing in businesses, I think the really, I'm going to call it, it's not smart, it's obvious, right? I actually think it's really obvious, but the really powerful turbo driver to those two skill sets that plenty of people have is then the creating content, because you become almost like a one-man marketing band. By attaching yourself to a project, presumably you can help get extra eyeballs on that product or that service. You can help to drive revenues. You are just very valuable in that sense. And so I guess what caught my attention here is I'm a private investor at this stage, but I'm absolutely open to the idea of investing other people's monies in opportunities I see. And that would require me to really put myself out there and say, this is an opportunity I see. This is where I'm putting my money. Who would like to do it with me? But alongside that, it's like, what businesses can I build? And I've started this podcast. I will make a business out of this. Year one, as you might have heard me say, is just going to be all about getting in a good flow, creating the right content, high quality, and getting myself out there, getting the systems and processes in place, making sure my team's happy and absolutely loving it and getting better and better themselves. And so I'm ticking those two boxes, and actually it transpires I'm creating content too. It's like, Pomp, right on, mate. Let's be the triple threat. I'm bang up for that. What I don't yet know, and I think this is what catches my attention, is like, what is the outcome of that? And why is he so interested in that? I guess the answer lies in episode 1 of his new show that I've got starred. I need to go and listen to, which I'll probably go and do now, shall I? Let me just wrap this one up with a couple of comments around action brings clarity. And so when we are coming up with ideas, thinking about doing things, dreaming up stuff, just start in some way. And then don't let great get in the way of good. So procrastination or perfectionism is actually very, very unhelpful. You just got to get the ball rolling. And the process of being the triple threat, it sounds pretty awesome, doesn't it? Like what a cool thing to do with your time. Now, obviously that's over and above, one's commitments to their family. And when I say over and above, one's family should always come first, in my view. So as long as one is kicking goals in that area and comfortable with what's going on, then it's a case of like, well, what do I want to do with my time? And actually being a triple threat sounds like a great vibe. And I'm keen on that. So yeah, cool. To anyone out there that's thinking of being a triple threat, let's go for it. To anyone out there that's thinking of starting a new business, do it. To anyone out there that hasn't yet made their first investment or is thinking of making an investment, get on with it. Like, you'll learn. If it goes to zero, well, that's okay. You learn from it. And never over allocate to one thing that you're not totally comfortable with. Understand what you're doing. Do your own research. in my experience with investing, your biggest loss is actually your biggest lesson. Find people that you respect. What are they investing in? Why? Can you learn from them? Leverage that. And then the content piece, like ironically, going back to the social media platforms where you are the product as a user, it's insanely easy to create content. It's literally a case of press record on your mobile phone, start talking. So in some ways, there are no excuses. You can make content every day of the week. If anyone wants to kick up the arse to start a podcast, get in touch. I'll do it. I've done it with a few friends. It's a case of like, right, get hold of 10 people, book them in on a calendar over 10 weeks at the same time, every Tuesday night, and click record using some video call software and post it online. You don't even need to like have an intro song or an audio tag or show notes or any editing. You can just literally just post these things. And what happens with the content, which I think is the most powerful thing, is it doesn't disappear, and it's like digital breadcrumbs. So that fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel, which you may or may not remember, but the idea of like follow the breadcrumbs, right? Is people find your content because they stumble across it for whatever reason, and they then find you, and that value that the content creator is putting out in the world comes back in spades in lots of different areas that you don't necessarily expect. And that's something I'm very proud of. So again, if anyone hasn't quite got going with the content creation side of things, get going. It's really cool. It's very valuable, and you won't regret it. With that, lots of love, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate you listening to the podcast.